Throughout the centuries, the House of the Seven Gables has stood as a sign of Salem's wealth and glory, despite the decades it has endured. Being built during a period of America's destructive war and prosperous trade, it has been lost and inherited, renovated and enriched by the labors and ventures of those who inhabited it. The house itself is very favorably built directly by Salem Harbor, overlooking the wharfs where its owners' ships resided. The building's location proved to be equally as much of a blessing as a curse for its residents, as it provided adequate surveillance of the port's trades, but also made re-entry from a journey very difficult due to the large mass of ships, which eventually proved fatal to one of the owners. Both families who owned the home, the Turners and the Ingersolls, would help build the small town of Salem into a sprawling port city, each during their own era of time and with their own niche in American history. In September of 1644, John Turner was born in Boston. The eldest surviving son of the shoemaker, Robert Turner, John spent his early years in the midst of a developing trading community. Although he was only 7 years old upon his father's death, it is likely that John would have learned the family trade. How is it then that this young boy, born and raised in commercial New England, entitled to 1/4 his father's wealth, surfaces nearly 2 decades later in Salem as one of the most prominent merchants in the city? The answer is not clear. However, there is a path to follow. John Turner I built the first edition of his home in the year 1668 as one of the first permanent residents in the recently settled Salem village. As a paradigm of New England men, the young merchant amassed and secured a vast fortune, exploiting the natural resources of the sea and making use of new international trade routes, as well as sailing for ports that have never been traded with before. The young captain quickly became a prominent mariner of the triangle trade, a journey that stretched across the Atlantic to the homeland of England and to Africa. By the early 1700s, the Turner name became well known for its exports, and the newest head of the family, John Turner II, began fully launching his ships to the sea. His triangle trade became known as the cod trade, as the abundant fish proved to be just as abundantly useful to the Europeans. Along with the cod went varieties of goods made in the early colonies, such as rum, and all of it helped fuel the slow-growing colonies and provided exceptional amounts of wealth for them and England. The following are the words of a different local merchant.
Dry, merchantable codfish for the markets of Spain, Portugal, and the Straits. Returns made directly to England are sugar, molasses, and cotton. Our own produce, a considerable quantity of whale and fish oil, furs, and bear skins, are annually sent to England. We have much shipping here, and the rates are low.
The legacy of the Turners ends with John Turner III, born in August of 1708. Today, the only visual representation of the Turner family, John Turner III lost the family fortune, amassing an inventory that took up less than 3/4 of the page, as opposed to the 15-page fortune of his father. Much of the wealth gained by John Turner II was given to the war effort for the Revolution, and was never recovered through trade. In the 1770s, the Turner name was removed from the House of the Seven Gables. In 1782, Captain Samuel Ingersoll purchased the House of the Seven Gables at auction, immediately constructed his own renovations, and began a new era of Salem's foreign trade. During the years immediately following the Ingersoll's purchase, the port city became heavily involved in international trade and experienced an economic revival, and Captain Ingersoll was well positioned to become involved. The captain owned several ships in his fleet, and by this time, mariners were using more modern steamships, which could go farther and faster. Without wasting any time, Captain Ingersoll began sailing around the world, beginning Salem's time in the golden age of sail. The main focus of the Ingersoll expedition was China and its wares. Rather than exporting American goods to Europe, Ingersoll imported the prized Chinese goods to New England, made unimaginable profits, and decorated his home with these treasures. The decades that lasted during the Age of Sail, from 1780 to 1810, made Salem a fountain of wealth, boasting the titles of 6th largest city in New England, wealthiest city by capita, and even being mistaken as a country by China. Despite their apparent prosperity, the Ingersoll family was riddled with despair. Out of 5 children born to Captain Ingersoll, only one survived past the age of 22, his daughter Susanna. Well aware of the frailty of life, perhaps all the more so due to his time at sea, Captain Ingersoll filled out a will in 1787. The document begins:
I, Samuel Ingersoll, calling to mind the mortality of my body, and knowing that it is appointed to all men once to die, do make and ordain this my last will and testament.
The document stated that upon his death his property was to be divided amongst his wife and surviving children. However, when Captain Ingersoll died in 1804 from yellow fever aboard his ship, only Susanna survived. Alongside his father, Ebenezer Ingersoll, who was destined to be the heir, died aboard the same ship with his father when they were returning from a trade journey in China. Their ship was entering the Salem harbor when they both passed from the sickness. The years following 1810 marked the end of the golden age of sail, as well as Salem's decline in trade industry. As New England expanded, other cities began thriving and proved to be more efficient than Salem's shallow port. Much larger ports such as Boston and New York could harbor much deeper-hulled ships, and eventually Salem's fame wore off. However, the glory of the sailors and mariners who dedicated their lives to the expansion of their city is still remembered today, immortalized in the homes and ships they left behind. Their conquests are remembered as achievements in American history. The Turner and Ingersoll families are recognized in particular for their monetary contributions during the Revolutionary War, as well as the War of 1812, but most importantly for pioneering new trade routes for their young America to prosper from. Today, the House of the Seven Gables exists as a memorial to their efforts, and represents the vast wealth that one could acquire through the sea trade.